the treasure is real. Not as a legend, not as a story told in waterfront bars by people who need something to believe in. As a documented historical event recorded in multiple independent sources, corroborated by physical evidence, and accepted by serious historians who have no particular reason to want it to be true. Somewhere on a small island in the Pacific Ocean, 550 kilometers off the coast of Costa Rica, there is gold. Not a chest of coins, not a pirate's hoard from a single raid. The accumulated wealth of an empire, hidden in a moment of crisis, never recovered. This is Cocos Island, and the treasure buried here, if the accounts are accurate, represents one of the largest concentrations of hidden wealth in human history. The story begins in Lima, Peru, 1820. The Spanish colonial empire in South America is collapsing. Simón Bolívar's forces are advancing. The Spanish viceroy in Lima faces a decision that every colonial administrator fears. What do you do with the treasury when the empire falls? The Lima treasury at this moment was extraordinary. 3 centuries of colonial extraction had produced an accumulation of gold and jewels and religious artifacts that had been flowing toward Lima from across the continent. The Cathedral of Lima alone contained gold candlesticks, golden altarpieces, bejeweled chalices, and the life-size solid gold statue of the Virgin Mary, known as the Nuestra Señora. The total value of what was Lima's churches and treasury in 1820 has been estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars in modern terms. Some estimates go higher. The viceroy decided to move it out of Lima, out of reach of the approaching revolutionary forces, onto a ship called the Mary Dear, captained by a British merchant named William Thompson. Thompson was hired to transport the treasure to Mexico for safekeeping until the political situation resolved. Thompson did not go to Mexico. He went to Cocos Island. What happened next depends on which account you read. The version that has become standard is that Thompson and his crew killed the Spanish guards, who had been placed on the ship to ensure the treasure arrived safely. They buried the treasure on Cocos Island. They were subsequently captured by a Spanish warship. Most of the crew were executed as pirates. Thompson and his first mate were spared in exchange for agreeing to lead the Spanish to the treasure. They led a landing party into the jungle, and then they disappeared into it. Never seen again. The treasure unfound. This is the Lima treasure, and it is only one of 3 separate treasure deposits that are alleged to exist on Cocos Island. The uncomfortable part. Cocos Island has attracted treasure hunters for 200 years. The list of people who have gone there, believing they would find the treasure and left empty-handed, includes presidents, admirals, millionaires, and the kind of obsessive personality that mortgage a house and spend a decade reading historical documents in 4 languages before committing to a single excavation. Franklin Roosevelt visited Cocos Island 3 times. Not as president before his presidency. He was obsessed with the treasure. He found nothing. Malcolm Campbell, the land speed record holder, financed an expedition. Nothing. August Gisler, a German colonist, lived on the island for 19 years in the late 19th and early 20th century. 19 years. He found a few gold coins. Nothing that matched the scale of what was supposedly buried there. Over 300 expeditions have been mounted to Cocos Island since 1820. Over 300. Not one has returned with anything significant. There are 2 possible explanations for this. The first is that the treasure was found long ago by someone who had every reason not to announce it. The second is that the treasure was never buried on Cocos Island, that the story is a fabrication or a misunderstanding, or the kind of legend that grows from a grain of truth until the grain is invisible. The third possibility, that the treasure is there and 300 expeditions simply missed it, is the one that treasure hunters prefer. It is not the most parsimonious explanation, but it is the one that keeps people going back. The island itself makes the search genuinely difficult. This is not a convenient excuse. Cocos Island receives approximately 7,000 millimeters of rainfall per year, one of the highest rainfall totals of any place on Earth. The jungle is dense beyond what most people can imagine without having stood in it. The rivers flood and change course. The terrain is steep and unstable. A hiding place that was accessible in 1820 may be buried under meters of accumulated material in 2024. The island is also protected. Since 1978, it has been a national park. Since 1997, a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Digging is prohibited. The Costa Rican government enforces this with a permanent ranger presence. Any treasure hunter who finds something faces the immediate problem of being on protected land with archaeological material they are not legally permitted to remove. This has not stopped people trying. It has changed how they try. The map ends here. The territory continues. The underwater treasure of Cocos Island is less discussed than the buried variety, but may be more significant. The waters around Cocos Island are among the most biodiverse in the Pacific. Hammerhead sharks in schools of hundreds, whale sharks, manta rays, dolphins. The island sits at the convergence of 4 ocean currents, which produces an upwelling of nutrients that supports an extraordinary concentration of marine life. The wreck of the Mary Deer, if the account is accurate, if the ship was actually called the Mary Deer, if it actually came to Cocos, may lie in these waters. The island has also accumulated marine wrecks over the centuries of Pacific navigation. Ships that stopped for water, ships that sought shelter from storms, ships that were not as lucky as they needed to be. The submarine landscape around Cocos Island is terrain that has barely been mapped. The UNESCO designation protects it. The depth makes systematic survey difficult. What is down there, exactly, is genuinely unknown. The 3 treasure deposits alleged to exist on Cocos Island are sometimes called the Lima treasure, the Benito treasure, and the Peruvian treasure. They are alleged to have been buried at different times by different people for different reasons. The cumulative value, if all 3 exist and all 3 are intact, has been estimated at over $1 billion in modern terms. This number is probably inflated. Treasure estimates always are. The psychology of buried treasure requires the numbers to grow with each retelling. The original value, whatever it was, becomes insufficient to justify the obsession, so the obsession inflates the value to justify itself. But even a fraction of the alleged total would represent one of the most significant archaeological finds in the Western Hemisphere. The gold statue of the Nuestra Senora alone, if it exists, and if it is where Thompson allegedly buried it, would be worth tens of millions. And it would be worth more than its gold content. It would be a colonial-era artifact of extraordinary historical significance. The kind of object that rewrites museum collections and research agendas. The 3 expeditions that are said to have disappeared from Cocos Island add a different dimension to the story. The accounts are vague. The documentation is poor. It is not clear that 3 expeditions actually disappeared in the sense of leaving people unaccounted for, as opposed to returning without finding anything, and the failure being retrospectively described as a disappearance to make the story better. The island is not supernaturally dangerous. It is practically dangerous. The rainfall and the terrain and the isolation combine to make an accident genuinely consequential. A broken leg on Cocos Island in the 19th century was a different problem from a broken leg anywhere with medical infrastructure. People died on expeditions, not because the island killed them, but because the island offered no margin for error. The current ranger station has medical facilities. There is helicopter access in emergencies. The practical danger has decreased. The treasure, if it exists, is no more accessible than it was. What Cocos Island actually is, stripped of the treasure story, is one of the most remarkable ecosystems on Earth. The isolation that made it attractive as a hiding place, 550 kilometers from the mainland, difficult to reach, difficult to stay on, also made it a refuge for species that have evolved without human interference. The bird life is extraordinary. 3 species of birds found nowhere else on Earth. The marine life is extraordinary. The underwater visibility is extraordinary. People who have dived at Cocos Island describe it as one of the best dive sites in the world. Hammerhead sharks circling in formations that look choreographed. Visibility stretching to edges of what human vision can resolve. Marine life behaving as if it has never learned to be afraid of anything, because on most of it, it has not. The treasure hunters see the island as a means to an end, a container for something they want to extract. The marine biologists and conservationists see an ecosystem that requires protection from exactly that kind of thinking. The Costa Rican government has sided with the conservationists. The treasure hunters continue to arrive anyway. The last serious treasure hunting expedition permitted on the island used ground-penetrating radar and came away with readings that some interpreted as consistent with large buried objects. The Costa Rican government declined to authorize excavation. The readings remain unverified. The potential objects remain buried, or they do not exist. The radar readings mean what treasure hunters want them to mean until an excavation proves otherwise. And the excavation is not coming. Not while the island is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thompson, if he existed as described, if the story is accurate, buried something on Cocos Island in 1820 and disappeared into the jungle. 200 years have passed. 300 expeditions. The gold statue of the Virgin Mary, if it was buried, has been under the soil of a Pacific island for 2 centuries. The jungle has grown over whatever marks were left. The rivers have moved. The island has changed. The treasure, if it exists, is as inaccessible as it was the day it was buried. More inaccessible. The jungle has had 200 years to hide it further. Above the water, hammerhead sharks circle in the blue. Birds that exist nowhere else on Earth nest in trees that have never been cut. Rangers patrol beaches that have barely been walked. The island keeps its secrets the way islands do. Not through active concealment. Through indifference. The treasure may be there. It may not be. The island does not care either way. It was here before the treasure was allegedly buried. It will be here long after the last treasure hunter gives up. Some questions are not meant to be answered. They are meant to be carried. Cocos Island has been carrying this one for 200 years. It shows no sign of putting it down.